Have you ever stood or passed by a public market and never saw the other side of it? Definitely you should see like cars at first, but have you ever experienced seeing clearly of what's happening inside the market? I've remembered so much teledrama back in the day that most crimes happen in public markets, like those guys who have chasing scenes where an FPJ would just catch them up and beat them up, but in reality, I'm no FPJ to catch a robber or even fend off one. Perhaps even notice one in these kinds of environment. My name is Steven Verde and I will be discussing on fortification of public areas using passive design measures on public markets. So, to understand the state of public markets, let's step back and describe the roles of the public market to the community. A public market is a societal platform wherein people gather around and develop relationships such as vendor to customer interaction. It is a cultural hub wherein people get to promote the culture of the community they are in. Economical as we speak, as this is a public establishment and people would want it to be as accessible as much as possible. Background of the problem. A brief history. To step back further, where it all started, traditional markets ran through barter trades, which is an exchange of a valuable item for an equivalent way for it. When the Spaniards colonized the Philippines, the form of trading evolved into exchanging precious stones instead of any valuable item. The Intramuros was one of the major business districts in Asia. The problem. The public markets that we currently have has been outdated design-wise. This brings issues such as poor ventilation, insufficient lighting, congested passageways that restrict easy movement within the establishment, and unsanitary, which reflects how badly these are managed. Goals, objectives, and strategies. The main goal is to develop and design a safer environment for public spaces, focusing on public markets. This is because it is an impending establishment that could easily be thrown off by supermarkets or any type of innovation the future holds. Objectives. Passive measures are to be used so that it is much easier to integrate and maintain, especially for the public. Establishing a direct flow to make it easier for people to become more efficient of their movement around the site. Implementing an environment that sets a high standard which makes it hard for people to vandalize, at the same time make it accessible even for the less fortunate. The main strategy is to reach out to the younger generations as they are incoming generation that will most likely utilize these establishments. Significance of the study. As discussed in the introduction, the three roles that a public market play in the community is an important part of the culture or a community that should thrive and be cherished by its people. It is the identity that develops through social interactions. It is a key to improvement of economical means, especially for those who wish for a simple lifestyle. And traditions will always reflect the deepest roots of our culture. Scope and limitations. For the scope, for public areas in general, public market is chosen as the archetype and would focus the study more into designing and applying innovations that would benefit a market. Other public areas are not to be included, such as parks, squares, and beaches. Limitations would be that the public market cannot be dictated by exquisite forms that are out of this world and would ruin the entire landscape of the city. The building should be simple and reflects the common tradition to keep its relevance and identity to the public. Data that would be provided would be outdated as the city of Lebak has not updated any of the data and is not available on the PSA. Research and feasibility tackles the data that will be used to test the viability of the project. Surveys are conducted to the millennial generation and Generation Z, which cover the people who would start to graduate from schools and start to live individually at this time. This will be set as the target market for the study, as it is when they start to become independent, and promoting the option of public markets to their lifestyle would be a great addition. To summarize the survey, It would be set on a comparison table where the data on pros and cons from the answers of the respondent are listed. On the public market, pros are fresher produce and more interaction, while cons are insufficient parking spaces, cleanliness issues, and feeling of disorder and discomfort. On the supermarkets, pros are available commodities, cleanliness, orderliness, and fully automated. On the cons would be lesser fresh goods, little to no interaction, and no bargaining. Both sides were particularly equal in terms of convenience in travel time. The closest one will always, if not most of the time, will be picked over the other according to the respondents. To conclude, public markets in terms of freshness and wholesomeness of choice, while supermarkets still prevail on convenience and orderliness. This only shows how much work there is to improve the public market archetype. Just a quick overview of the demographics that include or relate to this project. The total population of those who will be working soon, as the data was dated in 2010, is 173,996 out of 747,87 total population during this time. That is about 23% of the population that by recording of this time would be working. There is about 122,745 who work as farmers, forestry workers, fishermen, and about 17,307 out of 80,941 people in city of Lebak. And around 166,739 total workers who work in the agricultural, forestry, and food service, and about 22,808 of these workers are private business owners or self-employed. These are big enough numbers, especially for a rural community. According to the CLUP of Lebak, Sultan Kudarat, there is a shortage of network for people in the agricultural industry to market their produce to the public. This only gives more incentive into establishing a public market. The research framework is used to identify a concern or problem that needs to be studied and understood. So the flowchart above shows that the general public in the current times, grocery or supermarkets is more approachable and accessible because it is cleaner and safer platform, whereas the public markets there is a risk of safety due to the establishment inherent environment that invites threats and accidents that is also congested and disorderly. There are two factors that draw visitors into choosing public markets, and it is the need for more fresher produce and the interest towards the culture. Architectural problem. These are architecturally manifested or rooted problems that is apparent to the human senses. These are common mistakes that rise up, especially when an establishment is either poorly designed or poorly managed. The following architectural problems are easily observed and are commonly problems that easily noticed when visiting a public market. There is a lack of ventilation which leads to foul smell lingering in the air, inadequate lighting or fenestration to retain enough light inside, easily congested passageway especially at peak hours or during seasonal breaks. Architectural solutions. These are possible approaches into searching ways of solving the problems the public markets are facing. Case studies are sample buildings of the same type from other countries and take inspiration onto innovations that are applied in their public market and to see if it can be applied or is being applied in the Philippines. The fruit and vegetable market in Mohali is an example of a public market that uses warehouse frames as its shell structure. It is an efficient way to get a wide span of coverage, but at the same time sacrificing the opportunity to create an interesting or different form. The public market utilizes and maximizes space by clearing everything in sight and keeping the vendors on elevated concrete floors where they put up their stalls. Milwaukee Public Market in Wisconsin, USA, uses various materials such as steel frames, concrete, glass, which creates an open space where vendors and buyers can dwell in. It is a good composition of materials, especially when it's dark. It glows like a light box. This is a good example of an effective public market that caters to the public and considers cleanliness and aesthetics achieved through simplicity. James Bear Public Market has one of the most modern approach of structure where it is mainly made of just steel frames and curtain walls. The good take from this project is the utilization of space and allocating the frontal space for restaurants and cafes to attract more customers at the same time taking advantage of the short distance they are from their suppliers. Review of related literature are books or references that could deem useful on the search of solutions for the problems listed above. It does not pertain to the topic itself but should be relative to the problem and could contribute in solving the existing issues. Book 1, Freezing Effects on Food Quality. The book is a reference for process of freezing foods and how it affects the quality of food. This is to reflect the produces that are commonly sold in supermarkets, which is inherently bad for you, but it is still convenient in so many ways. While in public markets, there could be cold storages existing, but this could be because fresh meat would easily go bad in a few hours, which is essential for a public market. Book 2, Minimal Processing Technologies in the Food Industry. This is a book that discusses about the processes food go through. This book is an awareness that it is rare nowadays to get purely fresh produce and the lots of food that people intake have changed drastically in years. This is why it is important to keep public markets going because it is, at least at this establishment, there is still a bunch of purely produce goods and public market promotes a healthier lifestyle. Book 3, Marketing to Millennials, reached the largest and most influential generation of consumers ever. This this book seeks to understand the younger generations. By understanding them with the trends that keep coming up, it is hard to come up a timeless concept that would test time and progress easily towards the future. The mindset of acceptance of what the future holds is far greater and invites more opportunities. Book 4, The Farmer's Market Book, Growing Food, Cultivating Community. The fourth book is a reference on the value of having a farmer's market and being aware of how food is grown. A farmer's market is an ideal modern archetype of a public market that which has a mindset of keeping everything fresh and towards a goal of a healthier environment and lifestyle. Book 5, Design for Water. The book is all about rainwater collection, which is another feature that needs to be implemented in not just on this specific study but to every project there is, especially in a tropical setting where there are months of precipitation. The site is subject to slight flooding, which means that consideration on water movement is a big part of the project that ensures the safety and resiliency of the users. Innovations that will be implemented on the site will focus more on passive design features where it is not noticeable but will be effective on solving the problem. Solar panels is a common innovation and should be standardized in order to get closer into a cleaner environment. Another type of generation of passive energy is pavement tiles, a technology that replaces normal tiles and acts as pressure plates to generate energy. This takes advantage of waves of crowds that will be visiting the site, which adds another quality of life for the users. Recycling vending machines would be installed around the site to incentivize recycling of trash and would avoid people of polluting the site with common trash. Trash has a lot of bad effects towards the site, making it look dirty and clog waterways and could send off bad odors. Permeable brick paving would be used all around the site to help absorb humidity, especially when it rains. Vegetation and wide open spaces is the core foundation of passive design feature applied on site. This combination of a feature not only serves as a filter for the bad odor, but is also aesthetically pleasing and creates a feeling of comfort because of a wide available space. This feature also makes the environment look more orderly and clean. It is easily to spot malicious intent as the spaces are too wide and people would see each other in the blink. It gives off a high-end feeling because of the verticality, but also keeps grounded with the materials used circling around natural elements such as stone, water, and wood. Site. The desired and chosen site will be described and said about the factors to consider when approaching the designing of the building and overall use of the land. The site is a 3.2-hectare parcel of land that is located at the city proper of Lebak, Sultan, Kudarat. It only takes 15 minutes walk to get to the city plaza, about 5 minutes of tricycle and about 10 to 20 minutes by car to get to the beach, which only makes the site accessible to everyone. Originally, the land was classified as an agricultural land, but later on changed due to the abundance of agricultural land and the need for more commercial land and specifically markets for farmers, fishermen, and small business owners can thrive in. The site analysis above shows the natural elements that should be considered when designing the building. Knowing that Lebak is a shoreline community, there's a channel of sea breeze on the left side of the site. Conceptual framework and development is a tool to be used to list down the consideration in coming up a concept and a tool of organizing the thoughts of the researcher. The flowchart above may be intimidating, but to explain it in order, there are two ends on this chart, which is the vendors and the visitors, while the market is at the core center of all of this. Before making a decision, a visitor must go through three responses: instinct, need, and intuition. Instinctively, if a market does not look clean and inviting, one would deny of ever visiting the place. Needs always weigh in the intent and would only be a big factor if there are no other choices available. Intuition is similar to the instinct but considering the opportunities lost and risks to take. On the other hand, vendors are subject to three responses as well: access, livelihood, and promotion. Access determines if they are able to realistically thrive in the business structure, such as public market. Livelihood, it is the style they choose to live in, such as the simplistic ways of farmers, fishermen, and others. Promotion pertains to the opportunities the public market brings. Both ends have one deepest desire. On visitors, it is the satisfaction, and on the vendors, it is sustainability, which then leads to reward. The reward is what can be achieved in markets, but there are two factors that affect the market generally. Environment is determined by the established characteristics by design and inherent feature from nature, which revolves around uniqueness, interactiveness, and flexibility. The other factor is risk, which branches out from the three responses discussed earlier on both sides, which are driven by the norm, culture, activities, and operation by which can be eliminated through passive design. Site development plan is the process of which the site would be developed, depends on the concept and how it is applied with the innovations chosen. The site is divided into three parts and mirrored on each side. This easily separates the building depending on the purpose and promotes movement around the site in a linear plan. Floor plans will be thoroughly explained as the thought process of placement of spaces and organization of the overall structure and establishment. On the ground floor, food stalls would be the front liner to take an inspiration to the James Bear Public Market, making food as a primary attraction for the public. This would serve as a marketing strategy for presenting a waiting area alongside stalls that could tempt visitors and the public into spending their money and time. On the west side is where the wet market would be located, as this area is the lowest part of the site and would help water easily run off. This would avoid any spillage on other spaces and keep the odor from the fishes on the other side. While on the other end, the dry market is kept on this side as the sea breeze has less impact on this side and would less likely affect the produce presented to the customers. On the second floor consists of extension of both ends. At the center would be the trade market, where crafters can be far from the odors of the wet market and keep a safe distance from dry produce from unintended particles that could fly over, such as wood chips and dust that come from crafted items. Elevations are representations of material concept applied to the project and color scheme chosen. This is also to showcase the facade and general form of the building. The building does not go far from the warehouse archetype but is not entirely similar. It is similar with the long span of roof to protect the users from sunlight and rain. Stone and concrete walls are used for the exterior finish of the building and brick to give off a rustic theme. Green walls are applied to long span plain walls which would serve as the passive barriers separating the outside of the building and the inside. The building is widely open with passageways and an arcade that takes inspiration from the agora in Roman times. This feature also allows maximum ventilation without the use of artificial means. Sections are to showcase the interior elevation of the building and show the scale of humans to the spaces provided. The height of the building is almost 10 meters, with a 4.5 height of the ground floor and 4.8 for the second floor. The reason for this is to maximize natural ventilation. That is also a passive design feature wherein visibility throughout the site would make it near impossible to invite malicious acts, as it is not difficult to see everyone. The verticality gives off a high-end ambience that would make it more conscious for people to vandalize through littering or any other crimes, and at the same time, the material composition and simplistic approach towards spatial organization makes it accessible even to the less fortunate. Perspectives are presented to show the features and innovations applied to the building and showcase the overall aesthetic composition. The long span of roof resembles and takes inspiration of continuity of public markets. The mix of wood, stone, and vegetation reflects well on the surrounding environment, and the building is not obtrusive with surrounding buildings in the vicinity due to its simplistic nature. The three-part form of the building also takes inspiration from the Tres Andanas Falls, which is known waterfalls in Lebak. The center part of the building represents the waterfalls, while the wings would represent the cascading parts of it. There are also waterfalls installed on site to add aesthetic value and a friendlier and cleaner ambience. Pond and plant boxes are spread throughout the building to serve as natural filters to any odor that lingers in the air. The public market is a feat of a community that complements the economy, develops relationships, and continues the culture and traditions which stands as the identity of a community. It is important to protect these facilities by giving attention to even the smallest issues and make way to solve them accordingly. This is important as this is a gateway to primary resource for the public, and if this crashes, there would be certainly be a great deal of change that would be detrimental to everyone.